There is one thing I realized very early in life. When I was still a young man, hunched over, jotting down failed orders, running from one town to another, trying to do more, faster, staying busier, yet my life wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't lazy. I wasn't lacking ambition. I was just exhausted. And what confused me most wasn't the fatigue, but a question that echoed in my mind every night before I fell asleep. Why am I always busy, but never getting anywhere? I met many people like me, people always racing against time, yet never catching up with their own lives. They wake up feeling late, work feeling like they're chasing something, and go to bed feeling like they missed out. Not because they're incapable, but because they never learned the art of managing the one thing every one of us is given equally: time. Time favors no one. Rich or poor, young or old, strong or weak, everyone has 24 hours. But then one day, my first mentor said something that stopped me in my tracks. It's not time that decides your life, it's how you use your time that decides who you become. And that was the moment I realized time management wasn't about moving faster, but about living more intentionally. Not about stuffing in more tasks, but about understanding what is truly worthy of your life. And if you've ever felt your life was unfinished, scattered, exhausting, unfocused, stay until the end of this video. Because there are principles that, had you known earlier, you wouldn't have lived feeling like you were slowing down while time kept moving. Principle 1, finish what you start. There was a phase in my life when I started everything with extreme excitement, then abandoned it halfway. I bought books but never finished them. I made plans but never carried them through. I wrote down goals, but after a few weeks they became crumpled pieces of paper lying still in a drawer. And then I asked myself, why am I not moving forward even though I'm trying so hard? If yes, I thought the problem was lack of time, lack of opportunity, lack of luck. But the truth was different. What I lacked was the power to finish, because the way we do one thing is the way we do everything. This principle isn't about rushing, but about completeness. Finishing what you start doesn't just give you results, it creates something deeper. Trust in yourself. When you finish something, even something small, you plant a message in your mind that you are someone who can be relied on. And when that trust accumulates, your life changes direction. I remember the first time I stepped into sales, I knocked door to door, introduced every product, but the moment someone showed no interest, I backed away. I didn't finish the conversation. I didn't finish the process. I didn't finish myself. And my sales numbers reflected that. But when my mentor said, Jim, don't just start, finish, everything changed. I committed to finishing every meeting, every call, every presentation. Not because I liked it, but because I needed to become the kind of person who sees things through. And the results came like harvest season, quiet, but certain. History's filled with examples of people who had no advantage, weren't better than anyone else, but they finished. Thomas Edison failed thousands of times before the light bulb worked, but he finished. Henry Ford wasn't the first to build a car, but he finished a system that could be replicated. People who changed the world weren't the ones who started the most, but the ones who finished what mattered. Imagine a seed. It doesn't sprout and stop halfway. It doesn't rise and then get bored. It finishes its journey from the dark soil to the light. Life is the same. Not every seed becomes a tree, but every tree was once a seed that completed its process. And if nature understands this, why do humans forget? Now ask yourself, how many goals have you abandoned? How many plans left unfinished? How many dreams fell asleep halfway? Because the most dangerous thing isn't failure, it's getting used to quitting. One instance of quitting becomes a habit. A habit becomes an identity. And then a person wakes up after 10 years, realizing they never went anywhere. The core of this principle is, finishing creates power, quitting creates doubt. And I understood this not from books, but from my life. Every time I finished, whether it was a talk, a lesson, a small goal, I felt myself grow a little. Not because of the outcome, but because I kept my word to myself. And then I realized another truth, a deeper one. When you finish, time becomes an ally. When you quit, time becomes an accuser. But that's not all. Because after learning how to finish what I started, I discovered an even bigger barrier, one that keeps people from ever reaching the end of their journey: distraction. Principle 2, remove distractions and noise. I used to think failure came from lack of knowledge, lack of money, lack of connections, lack of opportunities. But then one morning, as I sat down to write out my goals with full determination within minutes, I was pulled away from what mattered by small things: an unnecessary call, a pointless invitation, something that had nothing to do with my journey. And when the day ended, I realized I had been busy but not moving forward, That's when I understood that the greatest enemy of success isn't failure, it's distraction. Because you can have plans, goals, ambition, but if your mind is constantly pulled away, you'll never go far. Distraction is like a tiny hole in a boat. No one notices at first, but eventually it sinks the entire journey. I remember when I worked in sales, I saw many people with great potential, but they never achieved results. Not because they didn't know how to sell, but because they couldn't focus long enough to finish anything. They responded to every invitation, joined every conversation, cared about everything irrelevant, and then they asked themselves, why am I not successful? My mentor told me a sentence I never forgot. Jim, if you let people control your attention, they will control your life. In history, many extraordinary people didn't win because they were better, but because they cut out what didn't matter. Leonardo da Vinci once said, perfection is achieved not when there is nothing more to add, but when there is nothing left to take away. And if that's true in art, it's true in life. Look at a farmer. He can't plant seeds everywhere, tend every piece of land, water every direction. He chooses then, focuses. If he spreads himself thin, the harvest fails. If he concentrates, the harvest thrives. Life is the same. It's not how much time you have, but what you use that time for. Ask yourself, who is stealing your minutes? What is pulling your mind away from the life you want to build? How many days have you lived without actually being present in your own life? Distraction doesn't only come from outer noise, but from inner chaos. Many people can't focus not because they're interrupted, but because they fear facing what matters most. What exhausts them isn't work, but the constant switching of attention. The core of this principle is, where you place your attention is where your life grows. And I learned this the hard way. When I removed unimportant tasks, I had time. When I removed people who dragged me down, I had space. When I removed chaotic thoughts, I had clarity. And that wasn't luck, it was choice. But here's the interesting part. When you remove distraction, you still haven't won. You've only cleaned the ground. To plant seeds, you need the next step, something that seems simple, but changes the entire power of time. Principle 3, start with small, easy actions. For a long time in my life, I believed that to change my destiny, I had to make big leaps. I thought if I wanted success, I had to do something huge, extraordinary, impressive. But again and again, I failed. Not because I wasn't capable, but because I tried to start at a level far beyond my endurance. And in the end, I went nowhere. One evening, as I flipped through old notes, I realized something that stunned me. I didn't fail because I did the wrong things. I failed because I did things too big too soon. My mentor looked at me and said something simple, yet life-changing. Jim, start with what's easy, then let small success build momentum for big success. This principle sounds gentle, but it's one of the strongest principles of time management. Because the hard part isn't working, it's starting. And to start, people need a small win, not a big pressure. When you finish a small task, your mind feels momentum. When you feel momentum, you act more. And when you act more, you move forward. That's the inertia of achievement, and it can change an entire life. I remember when I needed to improve my sales skills. I used to approach big clients right away, and I got rejected constantly. But then I changed strategy. I started with customers who were easier to talk to, friendlier, more open, and after a short time I felt more confident, my voice steadier, my presentations clearer. Small success created big power. The world has countless examples of the power of small beginnings. A musician doesn't start with a symphony, but with single notes. An athlete doesn't begin with a record, but with the first steps. Bamboo doesn't shoot sky high in one season. It quietly grows roots in the dark for years before rising. Achievement isn't an explosion, it's accumulation. Ask yourself, what small thing can you start today? What task can you finish in just 10 minutes? What action requires no strength, only willingness? Because time doesn't require you to be great, it only requires you to begin. And then, each small step connects into a path. One page a day becomes a book a year. One phone call each morning becomes a network. One small saving becomes financial freedom. One micro change becomes a macro life. The core of this principle is, things that are easy to do are also easy not to do. And that's where the difference in life lies. I used to choose not to do the small things and my life stopped. When I began doing the small things, my life moved. Not because they were big, but because they put me on the journey. And then I discovered another truth, deeper. You can start small, but you can't go far if you're exhausted. Many people don't lack motivation, they lack energy. Not because they don't want to start, but because they work themselves to depletion before they have a chance to transform. And that leads to the next principle, where you'll understand something most people realize too late. Principle 4, work hard, but with limits. There was a period in my younger years when I worked almost non-stop. I woke up early, slept very late, raced against time, as if stopping for 1 minute would send my life falling off a cliff. I believed working harder meant going further, and I believed if I sacrificed myself enough, success would come faster. But then one day, I looked at my life and realized a hard truth. I was exhausted, still not getting anywhere. I met so many people like me, people who worked day and night, yet never felt fulfilled. They were always busy, always urgent, always running, but when they paused and looked at themselves, they realized they were simply going in circles. Hard work is good, but burning yourself out is the shortest road to quitting. No one can stay on a long journey if they burn themselves at the starting line. This principle came to me when my mentor said a sentence I never forgot. Jim, working relentlessly without stopping isn't discipline, it's lack of wisdom. In life, many people confuse productivity with burnout, effort with self-destruction, giving their all with losing themselves. And they don't realize it until their body is tired, their mind blurry, their inspiration gone, and their self-belief shaken. I remember the time I traveled across states selling. I worked so much that I had no time for family, no space to think, no moment to breathe. I thought success would come as a reward for my sacrifice. But the only thing that came was exhaustion. And when I was exhausted, my work quality fell, my decisions worsened, my focus disappeared. I did more but achieved less. The world has countless examples of this. Talented artists burning out before creating their greatest work, promising entrepreneurs collapsing before their companies take shape, fathers and mothers losing their presence in their own families because they think they must trade it away. But life doesn't require us to burn ourselves, it only requires endurance. And endurance exists only when we know our limits. Look at a candle. It shines most beautifully when it burns steadily. But if the flame becomes too strong, it burns itself out faster and leaves darkness behind. We are the same. It's not the brightest flame that wins, but the flame that burns long enough to light the path. Ask yourself, are you working to the point where life is becoming blurry? Are you sacrificing health, relationships, joy without getting closer to your goals? Are you staying busy to avoid feeling lost? The core of this principle is, hard work gets you started, but balance gets you to the end. And I learned this through bitter experience. When I began setting limits, work hours, rest hours, reflection hours, I didn't do less, I did better. When I spent time with my family, I didn't lose time, I regained inner strength. When I allowed myself to stop, I didn't slow down, I accelerated at the right moments. And then I discovered another deeper layer. When you have energy, you have the capacity to learn. And when you learn, you shorten time. That's why the next step in the journey of time management isn't working faster, but becoming better. And that leads us to the next principle, one of the principles that changed my life. Principle 5, upgrade your skills to save your lifetime. I used to believe that if I just worked harder, did more, stayed up later, and sacrificed more, my life would change. But then one day, I saw another salesman. He didn't talk as much as I did, didn't walk around as much as I did, didn't seem as intense as I was, yet he achieved results many times greater than mine. And what surprised me most wasn't his talent, but the ease with which he worked. He wasn't rushing, he wasn't stressed, he wasn't exhausted, but he was successful. That's when I realized something that woke me up. I didn't lack time, I lacked skills. Because when you're not good enough yet, you have to use time to compensate. But when you become better, you use wisdom to save your lifetime. A highly skilled person can do in 1 hour what someone lacking skill needs a whole day to complete. And life does not reward duration, it rewards value. I remember the early years in sales when I had to meet 10 people to close one deal. I thought that was just the rule of life. But then my mentor said to me, Jim, when you lack skill, increase the numbers. But don't forget the ultimate goal is to increase skill so you can reduce the numbers. That is the game of numbers. But it's not a game of exhaustion, it's a journey of upgrading yourself. When your skills rise, the ratio changes. When the ratio changes, time is freed. And when time is freed, life opens up. The world has countless examples of this. A violinist doesn't practice to play more hours, but so that one note rings true. A skilled carpenter doesn't need to measure 3 times because his skill replaces his doubt. Henry Ford didn't succeed because he worked longer than others, but because he created a better process than others. Skill always beats time. Imagine someone rowing a boat. If his stroke is not technically correct, he has to use twice the effort to go half the distance. But just by adjusting the angle of his arms, the push, the rhythm of his breathing, the same journey becomes lighter. Life is the same. It's not strength that decides the distance, it's technique. Now ask yourself, where are you using time to make up for lack of skill? Where are you repeating mistakes instead of learning how to avoid them? Are you exhausted because you're doing more instead of doing it right? The core of this principle is, skill turns time into an asset, lack of skill turns time into a burden. I once spent years just to learn this. But when I started improving my skills, communication skills, listening skills, presentation skills, sales skills, I didn't just earn more, I lived better. I had time for my family. I had time to reflect. I had time to become the person I wanted to be. And then I realized an even deeper layer. Skill helps you master your life, but planning helps you direct it. Because if you have skills but no map, you'll move fast, but you won't know where you're going. And that is the door that leads to the next principle, one of the most important pillars of the art of time management. Principle 6, have a plan for your day, your week, your year, and your life. For a long time in my youth, I lived in reaction mode. Each day passed like waves crashing on the shore, not according to my will, but according to the winds of circumstance. I woke up and let life decide what I would do, who I would meet, where I would go, and what kind of person I would become. I didn't realize that if I didn't have a plan for myself, the world would make one for me, and I would just be a passenger in my own life. Everything changed one day when my first mentor asked me a question that left me stunned. Jim, is your life going somewhere, or are you just going? I had no answer. Not because I wasn't smart, but because I had never sat down long enough to think about it. I was busy existing, but I wasn't living intentionally. This principle isn't just about writing a to-do list. It's about designing a life. A daily plan only matters if it serves your weekly plan. The weekly plan must fit inside the structure of your monthly plan. The monthly plan must lead to the outcomes of your yearly plan. And your yearly plan must bring you closer to the person you want to become in this lifetime. I remember when I started changing the way I lived. I divided my time clearly, days for work, evenings for learning, weekends for family, and each year carried goals for my spirit, my finances, my health, and my impact. After a while, I realized I wasn't just doing more, I was becoming more. Throughout history, people who made a mark share one common trait: they knew where they were heading. Benjamin Franklin had a daily personal discipline schedule. Edison kept experiment records and research goals. Walt Disney sketched his vision when no one else believed. Life doesn't reward those who drift, it rewards those who are directed. Imagine a ship at sea. Without a map, it will drift, carried by winds and currents. But with just a compass and a charted course, it can cross an ocean. Your life is the same. It's not the wind that decides the direction, it's the sail. Now ask yourself, do you have a plan for tomorrow? Do you know in what way you'll be better this month? Do you have clear goals for this year? And most importantly, do you have a picture of the person you want to become before your life closes? If you don't write the plan for your life, you'll live inside someone else's plan. When I began to live with a plan, I felt time stop working against me. I no longer felt dragged around. I began to lead my life. I chose what was worthy of my time. I chose the people I allowed to walk with me. I chose the direction, and life opened the way. And then I realized a deeper layer. A plan is only truly powerful when it rests on goals and priorities. Because a plan without goals is just a list. And a plan without priorities will keep us busy but not moving forward. Principle 7, goals and priorities. Decide the destiny of your time. There was a period when every day of my life was full of activity but empty of progress. I did many things, rushed from one task to another, talked to many people, joined many events. But at the end of the day, I couldn't answer one simple question. Had I moved closer to the life I wanted? I felt busy, but I didn't feel meaningful. And then one evening, as I looked back at my schedule, I saw a truth that shook me. I had been prioritizing unimportant things and neglecting the things that could change my life. Not because I meant to, but because I didn't have clear enough goals to help me recognize what was truly worthy of my time. My mentor looked at me and said, "Jim, when the goal is clear, the path will appear." And expressed it. And he added, "And when the priorities are right, your steps will be strong." This principle is not just about setting goals, it's about setting the right goals and then prioritizing what moves you closer to them. Because many people have goals, but spend most of their time on things that do not bring them any closer to those goals. They think that activity equals progress, but those two are not the same. I remember when I started rewriting my goals clearly. Goals for finances, health, learning, relationships, and contribution. And as I looked at each goal, I asked a question that I want you to ask yourself right now. Which of the things I do every day actually helps me move forward? This. The world is full of examples that prove the power of clear goals. Napoleon Hill spent 20 years researching just to show that people who achieve great success all have specific goals. Explorers crossing oceans don't stare at each wave, they look at the destination. And in business, a great salesperson doesn't talk to everyone, they talk to the right people. Imagine a magnifying glass under the sun. If you keep moving it, the light won't burn anything. But if you focus it on one point, just one point, it creates fire. Life is the same. It's not time that creates power, it's focus. Now ask yourself, are your goals clear? Can you write them in one sentence? Does what you're doing today bring you closer to them? Who or what is taking time away from your goals? Without goals, time is meaningless. Without priorities, goals are useless. I saw the change in my life when I began to prioritize correctly. I chose to do what creates results first, then everything else. I spent time with people who lifted me up, not those who dragged me down. I said no to things that didn't lead me where I wanted to go. And my life began to move in a different direction, clearer, stronger, more intentional. And then I understood an even deeper layer. Priority is not only choosing the right things, it is daring to drop the wrong things. This is where many people stop. They know what matters, but they don't dare let go of what doesn't. And so they stay still. This leads us to a turning point principle, a principle that divides people into two groups: those who create results and those who only consume time. Principle 8. Distinguish between result-creating work and time-consuming work. There was a phase in my career when I worked almost all day. I took notes, made lists, organized papers, thought about strategies, prepared scripts, imagined scenarios, and convinced myself I was making progress. But at the end of the month, I looked at my numbers and they hadn't changed much. I was confused. I was disappointed. I wondered why I worked so much, yet achieved so little. My mentor looked at me and asked a question that felt like a wake-up call. Jim, are you working or just being busy? That was the moment I realized a truth that many people never get to understand. Not all tasks create results. Some tasks only create the feeling that we're working. And that feeling is more dangerous than failure because it makes us believe we're moving forward while in reality we're standing still. This principle divides life into two types of activities. 1. Result-creating activities. 2. Time-consuming activities. In sales, I used to spend hours evaluating potential clients, making lists, guessing, analyzing, instead of meeting them. But revenue only came when I presented, delivered value, and had real conversations. One real meeting is always worth more than 10 unexecuted plans. The world is full of examples of this. Scientists don't change history by talking about experiments, but by running them. Leaders don't create impact by endlessly reflecting, but by acting. Edison didn't sit forever analyzing light, he experimented, and that experimenting led to invention. Imagine a farmer. He can spend all morning talking about soil, discussing climate, debating seeds, but the harvest only comes when he plants. Life is the same. It's not knowledge that brings the harvest, it's the right action. Now ask yourself, how many of the things you do each day actually create results? How many things only create a feeling of being busy? How many conversations, meetings, preparations are just ways of delaying what truly matters? Are you willing to face this truth? Successful people spend 10% of their time preparing and 90% taking result, creating action. Unsuccessful people do the opposite. I used to be on the wrong side of that ratio. I tried very hard, but in the wrong direction. I was exhausted, but not improving. When I started asking, what in this work actually creates results? My life changed. I removed the time-consuming activities. I focused on creating value. I met real people, had real conversations, built real things, and I moved forward. And then I understood an even deeper layer. Sometimes time-consuming factors are not actions, but people. There are people who make you delay. There are people who pull you away from your goals. There are people who keep you busy, but going nowhere. And this is the door that leads to the next principle. A principle many people hear, but few are brave enough to practice. If you want to protect your time, you must learn how to say no. Principle 9, learn to say no to protect your life. There was a period in my life when I said yes to almost everything. I said yes to meetings that had nothing to do with my goals. I said yes to invitations just so I wouldn't be seen as different. I said yes to requests that cost me my time, my focus, and myself. And the scariest part was that I didn't realize that every time I said yes to something unimportant, I was saying no to the life I wanted. One day, my mentor looked at me and said a sentence that almost stopped me in my tracks. Jim, if you don't learn to say no, you will live the life other people choose for you. This principle is not about being cold or selfish, it's about boundaries. Because time is limited, and you can't keep giving it away without losing your future. Successful people are not the ones who do the most, they are the ones who refuse at the right time. I remember when I was still in sales, I was in a group of friends who loved to hang out, chat idly, and talk about other people's business more than building their own lives. Every time I tried to focus, they called me, and I went not because I wanted to, but because I was afraid of being different. But then one evening, when I looked at my results and theirs, I realized we were heading in two different directions. Not because we had different abilities, but because I started saying no. History is also full of such stories. Abraham Lincoln stepped away from pointless debate groups to spend time reading and learning. Great creators have all, at some point, refused things that distracted them so they could focus on what mattered most. No one writes a book, builds a business, or creates a meaningful life if they are always available to everyone. Imagine a garden. If you let every seed float in, every weed grow up, the garden will be crowded, suffocated, and chaotic. But if you are selective, you create a garden with shape, beauty, and order. Life is the same. Where there are no boundaries, there is no form. Now ask yourself, do you say yes because you want to or because you're afraid of upsetting others? Who is taking your time without bringing value back? Do you dare to protect the hours meant for your goals, your family, your health, your growth? Do you realize that every yes is a trade-off? The core of this principle is, saying no is not rejecting others, it is accepting yourself. I used to feel guilty when I said no, but then I realized this. The right people will respect your boundaries. People who don't respect your boundaries shouldn't be in your life. And when I started saying no, I had time to learn, to work, to love, to live, to become a better version of myself. And then I discovered a deeper layer. When you know how to say no, you create space, and that space is where a new life can be planted. Space to reflect, space to recharge, space to define your direction, space to recognize what truly matters. And that space leads us to a final principle, the principle where your competitor ends in a fragmented way, but we will conclude in a deep, smooth, and transformational way. Journaling, awareness, and the time legacy you leave behind. Principle 10, journaling, awareness, and the legacy of time. One evening, when I was still a young man struggling with life, I sat alone in a small room with a blank notebook in front of me. I had just gone through a long, disappointing day, and I felt like my life was fading, as if time was passing without leaving any trace. I opened the notebook and began to write, not to record achievements, but to record the truth, what I had done, what I had missed, what I was thinking, and what was weighing on my heart. And then I realized something that moved me deeply. When I wrote, I saw myself more clearly. This principle seems small, but it is one of the deepest principles of time management. Because no one can improve what they cannot see. No one can correct what they do not recognize. And no one can grow if they don't pause long enough to understand their own journey. A journal doesn't just record dates, it records awareness. It shows us patterns of behavior, cycles of emotion, habits of thought. It shows us whether we're going up or down. It shows us the days we lived intentionally and the days we let life sweep us away. I remember when I started writing regularly. After a while, I looked back and clearly saw what I used to be blind to. I tended to procrastinate in the afternoon. I often lost focus after low-value conversations. I had my best ideas in the morning. Without anyone teaching me, the journal taught me about myself. Great people in history all kept journals. Marcus Aurelius recorded his reflections to become a better leader. Da Vinci wrote down sketches and thought processes to feed his creativity. Benjamin Franklin tracked his self-improvement daily. They didn't write to show off, they wrote to understand themselves and to become more. Imagine a mirror. If you don't look into it, you still exist, but you don't know what you look like. A journal is the mirror of your mind. your time, your journey. Without looking, you don't see. Without seeing, you don't change. Now ask yourself, do you know how you've used your time this week? Do you know what makes you stronger and what makes you weaker? Do you know which days you truly lived and which days you merely existed? Do you record the meaningful moments or let them pass as if they never happened? The core of this principle is journaling turns time into wisdom, and wisdom turns time into legacy. And then I understood another deeper layer, something that changed the way I look at life. Every human being leaves a trace. The question is not whether you leave something, but what you leave. Not everyone leaves money. Not everyone leaves a name. But anyone can leave memories, lessons, values, experiences. A photo preserves a moment. A book changes how someone thinks. A journal page helps the next generation understand what you learned, what you overcame, what you believed in. And when I realized that, I started living differently. I no longer use time just to hit goals. I use time to create meaning. I didn't just live, I left footprints. I didn't just pass through life, I planted something for those who come after. And that is the final connection to the entire journey of time management. Time is not just for using, it is for transforming. Not just for finishing, but for becoming. Not just for achieving, but for leaving behind. As we reach the end of this journey, I want you to pause for a moment and truly feel this. Time is not just passing, it is carving out the person you become. Every choice you make, every priority you hold, every moment of awareness, all of it is shaping your life quietly but surely. If for many years you felt busy without moving forward, tired without changing your life, alive but not truly present, then remember, just one right decision can change the direction of the flow of time. Because time doesn't belong to the stronger, the smarter, or the luckier. Time belongs to the one who uses it intentionally. And if among these 10 principles there is one thing that woke you up, touched you, made you see yourself, then don't just listen and let it fade. Turn it into action within the next 24 hours. Leave a comment and tell me. 1. Which principle touched you the most? 2. What will you start changing from today? I read every comment because this journey is not just mine. It belongs to all of us. If you want to keep walking this path with me to learn deeper, live more intentionally, and use time to become instead of to burn out, then hit like. If you feel this video was valuable, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next sharings. Share this with someone you know who needs it. And I want to end with a quote I always carry with me. Success is not something you pursue, but something you attract by the person you become. Thank you for staying until the very end. That is the sign of a person who is ready to change their life.